चुटकी में. Think it, done with Bajaj FinServ.
हेलो, हर सीजन के लिए नए इंटीरियर्स.
हाँ, वो भी हर रूम के लिए.
फ्रिज, स्मार्टफोन या बड़ा टीवी,
तीनों क्यों नहीं?
अरे ये तो शॉपिंग लिस्ट में नहीं था.
So, अब शॉपिंग कार्ट में तो है. Sorry.
अच्छा, नए आउटफिट्स की विश लिस्ट.
Wish क्यों? Just add to cart and buy.
तो ये सब EMI पे?
और वो भी चुटकी में. On India's fastest growing EMI network. Think it, done with Bajaj FinServ.
सर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता. साहब, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता. हुजूर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता.
अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान.
अपनों को खुशियां दिलाना आसान नहीं बनाते तो आगे कैसे बढ़ते. इसीलिए हम जो भी करते हैं उसे बेहतर बनाते आ रहे हैं, बनाते रहेंगे. बजाज फिनसर्व, थिंक इट, डन.
माँ के बेडरूम का एसी या लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई. पुणे, पटना, चेन्नई, मथुरा या फिर बेगूसराय,
या फिर बेगूसराय.
नए घर के लिए चाहिए 4K टीवी हाई फाई, या फिर वाइफ को चाहिए लेटेस्ट स्टाइल. EMI है ना, EMI है ना, EMI.
मॉड्यूलर किचन में पुराना फ्रिज क्यों है भाई?
शादी है नहीं, मैट्रेस पुराना है भाई. अक्खा इंडिया बोले भाई प्राइजेस है हाई. बेस्ट ही खरीदना है तो अपने EMI स्टोर पर आए.
EMI है ना, EMI.
अब काशी हो या वाशी, महंगा लगे तो EMI और बेस्ट ही चाहिए तो भी EMI, क्योंकि बजाज फिनसर्व का EMI है ना. विजिट www.emistore.com.
EMI है ना, EMI है ना, EMI.
नाची 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 नाची.
धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी.
नाची 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 नाची.
इंश्योरेंस फ्रॉड से बचना है बहुत जरूरी जी.
नाची 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 नाची.
वो एजेंट है या फ्रॉड पता लगाओ जी. एक्स्ट्रा ऑफर के झांसे में कहीं फंस ना जाओ जी. अगर कोई अनजान कॉलर इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी डिटेल्स मांगे तो कह देना उनको.
नाची 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 नाची.
मिलके स्कैम को एंड करो, हमेशा सेफ रहो जी. Always verify the caller and do not surrender your insurance for attractive offers. हमेशा सावधान रहे, safe रहे. Issued in the interest of public awareness by Bajaj FinServ.
नाची 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 नाची.
धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी.
नाची 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 नाची.
जो होगा सो होगा, ऐसे ना सोचो जी.
नाची 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 नाची.
कॉल पे कोई पूछे OTP दो ना जी, तो कह देना उनको.
नाची 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 नाची.
मिलके स्कैम को एंड करो, हमेशा सेफ रहो जी.
Being a hero is all about heart. It's not about ruling the world. It's about owning it. It's not about winning a race. It's about delivering a smile to the human race. It's about a spirit that just cannot be confined by geographies. It's about the heart that beats for the future and a soul that echoes the values of generations. And yet, being a hero is never about the hero. It's about the millions who celebrate them. Hero Motor Corp, the motorcycle leader. There's a gush of wind that hums a sweet song. There's a gush of wind that fights like a hero to fill the world with possibility. There's a gush of wind that jumps across oceans and mountains, embracing the entire planet. There's a gush of wind that blows away darkness. There's a gush of wind that blows for humanity. Because at Hero, we care.
In 1868, the Tata Group was founded on a philosophy that put the community at the heart of its existence. Today, we are $100 billion global enterprise. Our today has been built on enduring values. Is about delivering excellence across business sectors. Is about building a future-ready nation. Our today has a strong foundation with community at its core. Our today is dedicated to the communities we serve. Today is always about more than just today. Our today is a continuous journey for a better tomorrow. Tata. Leadership with trust.
Behold, the story of victory, of life over malady. Behold the saga of power, of science over sickness. Behold the tale of triumph, of dedication over disease. Behold the rise and rise of Cadila Pharmaceuticals Limited, one of India's largest privately held pharmaceutical companies based out of Ahmedabad, Gujarat, India. Cadila Pharmaceuticals was born out of the vision of a legend who left an indelible mark in the chronicles of Indian pharmaceuticals industry. He was Indravadan Ambalal Modi, the founder chairman of the company, rightfully christened as the medicine man of India. His vision to alleviate pain of the underprivileged through research-driven innovations has been driving Cadila Pharmaceuticals for more than 6 decades now. Innovations which are backed by the key strengths of the company, the state-of-the-art manufacturing and research facilities. The flagship manufacturing facility at Dholka, Gujarat, sprawls over 100 acres. This avant-garde facility is US FDA approved, besides meeting most of the stringent quality standards across the globe. It manufactures tablets, capsules, injectables, liquids, and orals. The second formulations manufacturing facility is located at Samba in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. The API facilities at Ankleshwar, Gujarat, manufacture a large number of key APIs and intermediates at this US FDA and ISO 9002 and ISO 14001 accredited plant. The company also has set up its first ever overseas formulation manufacturing facility at Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. This world-class facility is the only WHO CGMP compliant manufacturing facility in the region. More than 850 products spread across 12 specialties with many of India's top brands in its basket. Great goals are defined by far-sighted vision and achieved by seamless teamwork. A multicultural, multilingual and multinational workforce of over 7,000 employees is truly the propelling power of the company. Not just in the domestic market, the company has a wide global footprint with over 1,000 marketing authorizations across 85 countries. Its international sales force of over 150 highly diversified and versatile personnel lends it an outreach that blankets the globe. As the company grows, so does its commitment to research. Manned by more than 350 scientists, the R&D facilities of Cadila Pharmaceuticals at Dholka, Gujarat is an institution of breakthrough innovations. To take the focus on innovation to the next level, it partners with leading international companies to discover newer treatments. The Cadila Pharmaceuticals Group is gigantic. Its group companies complement and expand the dynamic vision of the company across new avenues of healthcare and newer fast-paced business areas. Cadila Pharmaceuticals is a gentle giant. Decades of dedicated research, groundbreaking healthcare innovations, and worldwide impact proves the infinite potential of one powerful emotion. Care. The success of Cadila Pharmaceuticals bears testimony to the fact that the care continues.
आने वाले कल की दस्तक हमें सुनाई देती है, नई मंजिल है जिस ओर हमें वो दिशा दिखाई देती है। नए इंडिया का नया जोश, नए इंडिया का नया जोश, नए जोश से निकल आने वाला कल होगा हमारा, नए इंडिया का नया जोश।
और नए इंडिया के सफर में टेक्नोलॉजी की शक्ति लेकर आपका भागीदार रहेगा रिलायंस। नए इंडिया का नया जोश।
लाइफ में लेना देना तो चलता रहता है। इधर फ्लेक्सी लोन से बोरो कर लिया और उधर बाय मॉम डैड का वेकेशन डन। शादी का डिसीजन लिया, फ्लेक्सी लोन से और बोरो किया। प्रमोशन मिला तो ये लो थोड़ा लोन वापस कर दिया, थैंक यू। नए इंटीरियर्स का दिल किया, फ्लेक्सी लोन से फिर थोड़ा ले लिया। ईयर एंड बोनस मिला तो इस बार लोन ज्यादा वापस कर दिया। लाइफ में लेना देना चलता रहेगा तो लोन्स में क्यों नहीं। इसीलिए फ्लेक्सी लोन फ्रॉम बजाज फिनसर्व एक ऐसा लोन जो जब चाहे बोरो करे, जैसे चाहे रीपे करे, वो भी चुटकी में। थिंक इट डन विद बजाज फिनसर्व।
हेलो, हर सीजन के लिए नए इंटीरियर्स।
हाँ, वो भी हर रूम के लिए।
फ्रिज, स्मार्टफोन या बड़ा टीवी,
तीनों क्यों नहीं?
अरे ये तो शॉपिंग लिस्ट में नहीं था।
सो अब शॉपिंग कार्ट में तो है। सॉरी।
अच्छा, नए आउटफिट्स की विश लिस्ट।
विश क्यों? जस्ट ऐड टू कार्ट एंड बाय।
तो ये सब ईएमआई पे,
और वो भी चुटकी में। ऑन इंडियाज फास्टेस्ट ग्रोइंग ईएमआई नेटवर्क। थिंक इट डन विद बजाज फिनसर्व।
सर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता। साहब, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता। हुजूर, अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान हो ही नहीं सकता।
अपनों को खुश रखना इससे आसान।
अपनों को खुशियां दिलाना आसान नहीं बनाते तो आगे कैसे बढ़ते। इसीलिए हम जो भी करते हैं उसे बेहतर बनाते आ रहे हैं, बनाते रहेंगे। बजाज फिनसर्व, थिंक इट डन।
माँ के बेडरूम का एसी या लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई, लेटेस्ट मोबाइल फॉर भाई। पुणे, पटना, चेन्नई, मथुरा या फिर बेगूसराय,
या फिर बेगूसराय।
नए घर के लिए चाहिए 4K टीवी हाई फाई, या फिर वाइफ को चाहिए लेटेस्ट स्टाइल। EMI है ना, EMI है ना, EMI।
मॉड्यूलर किचन में पुराना फ्रिज क्यों है भाई?
शादी है नहीं, मैट्रेस पुराना है भाई। अक्खा इंडिया बोले भाई प्राइजेस है हाई, बेस्ट ही खरीदना है तो अपने EMI स्टोर पर आए।
EMI है ना, EMI।
अब काशी हो या वाशी, महंगा लगी तो EMI और बेस्ट ही चाहिए तो भी EMI, क्योंकि बजाज फिनसर्व का EMI है ना। विजिट www.emistore.com।
EMI है ना, EMI है ना, EMI।
नाची 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 नाची। धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी। नाची 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 नाची। इंश्योरेंस फ्रॉड से बचना है बहुत जरूरी जी। नाची 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 नाची। वो एजेंट है या फ्रॉड पता लगाओ जी, एक्स्ट्रा ऑफर के झांसे में कहीं फंस ना जाओ जी।
अगर कोई अनजान कॉलर इंश्योरेंस पॉलिसी डिटेल्स मांगे तो कह देना उनको
मिलके स्कैम को एंड करो हमेशा से। safe raho ji.
Always verify the caller and do not surrender your insurance for attractive offers. हमेशा सावधान रहे, safe रहे. Issued in the interest of public awareness by Bajaj Finserv.
धोखा है धोखा, धोखा ना खाओ जी. जो होगा सो होगा, ऐसे ना सोचो जी. कॉल पे कोई पूछे OTP दो ना जी,
तो कह देना उनको.
मिल के स्कैम को एंड करो, हमेशा सेफ रहो जी.
Being a hero is all about heart. It's not about ruling the world. It's about owning it. It's not about winning a race. It's about delivering a smile to the human race. It's about a spirit that just cannot be confined by geographies. It's about the heart that beats for the future and a soul that echoes the values of generations. And yet, being a hero is never about the hero. It's about the millions who celebrate them. Hero Motorcorp, the motorcycle leader. There's a gush of wind that hums a sweet song. There's a gush of wind that fights like a hero to fill the world with possibility. There's a gush of wind that jumps across oceans and mountains, embracing the entire planet. There's a gush of wind that blows away darkness. There's a gush of wind that blows for humanity. Because at Hero, we care.
In 1868, the Tata Group was founded on a philosophy that put the community at the heart of its existence. Today, we are $100 billion global enterprise. Our today has been built on enduring values. Is about delivering excellence across business sectors. Is about building a future-ready nation. has a strong foundation with community at its core. Our today is dedicated to the communities we serve. Our today is always about more than just a day. Our today is a continuous journey for a better tomorrow. Tata, leadership with trust.
I can't see her on the screen. Has she joined?
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening, ma'am. How are you?
Thank you.
I was just giving a very quick update. So basically, I'll just make some introductory remarks and then we will request Mr. Kant to make an opening. This thing, I think he has an opening session that he would be doing, and then we'll request our three of our foreign sort of invitees to be, to make their comments, and then, ma'am, I'll request you after that, and then we, depending on what time we have, we'll open up for questions, and I can ask some questions.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Danish, are we moving on to the? Let me know.
We are waiting for Mr. Kant to join. He'll join in next 30 seconds or so.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Rajiv, now we can start, please.
Okay. Hello, Mr. Khan. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well, thank you. So I'll start. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all those joining from around the world. A very special welcome to the 27th edition of the CII Partnership Summit and to this session of tracking India's reform journey and the investment trajectory. I would like to apprise our esteemed guests and participants about the summit, which has over 50 sessions spread over 3 days, including 7 country sessions. Also, close to 200 speakers have joined from 40 countries, which include 20 overseas ministers, 7 Indian ministers, 25 global CXOs, and more than 100 heads of institution leaders and experts. Let me begin by welcoming our very distinguished speaker, Mr. Amitabh Khan, CEO of the Niti Aayog. He needs no introduction. He's a man with a mission and has single-minded dedication and a visionary approach to make India a world-class destination for doing business. And he has worked behind the scenes tirelessly in laying down the framework for some of the largest reforms in this country. I also extend a very warm welcome to Ms. Sumita Davra, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India, to share her perspective on India's reform journey and the country's quest to become an attractive investment destination. Ms. Davra is an astute administrator and a policymaker par excellence. May I also thank her for all her support for the Partnership Summit. We would like to welcome our foreign panelist, Mr. Richard Heath, OBE, is the Group Chair, UK India Business Council. He possesses over 30 years of experience in the international financial markets, 20 years of which have been focused on advisory and capital raisings for both governments and major corporates across the globe. Mr. Richard Rosso is the Senior Advisor and Wadhwani Chair of US-India Policy Studies at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, US. Mr. Rosso has been working towards framing and shaping policies to promote greater business and economic engagement between the United States and India. Mr. Goldie Hyder is currently the President and CEO of Business Council of Canada, where he provides strategic communications counsel to the firm's extensive and diverse client base. Additionally, Mr. Hyder has had a long track record of services on behalf of several charities and non-profit organizations. A very warm welcome to all of you. We are meeting at a time when the Indian economy is on a significant growth trajectory. Both the IMF, Reserve Bank of India expect a 9.5% growth in the current financial year. I personally think it will be higher than that. And an interesting parameter or barometer is the venture capital and private equity investments, which are at an all-time high. From April to November, the total investments in this have been almost $72 billion as against $48 billion in the entire previous year. When we had the pandemic, there was a strong demand to follow what many other countries had done, but India had its own unique approach given the circumstances that we were in, and the government looked at a three-pronged approach. First was to support the most needy during the pandemic. The second was to create and allocate greater fiscal space to promote capital spending. And lastly, and most importantly, was the renewed focus on structural reforms with the aim of becoming a 5 trillion economy in the next 5 years. Reforms have been undertaken across the economy, covering labor, electricity, manufacturing, financial sector, infrastructure, privatization, the list is long. And I do think that the cumulative impact of the reforms undertaken in the last few years have been very, very transformational and could be compared to some extent with what we saw in 1991. The commitment to Atmanirbhar Bharat, making India economically strong and self-reliant, is central to many of the actions taken. Despite the fiscal pressures, the government has stayed the course to scale up infrastructure investments. The National Infrastructure Pipeline has projects of almost $2 trillion from 20 to 2025. The Gati Shakti National Master Plan will enable better coordination between ministries. And similarly, almost $60 billion in terms of asset monetization program, which I know Niti Aayog has been working very closely on, will hopefully release substantial revenues to support some of these investments. Apart from that, there has been a massive digitization program going across governments and departments, and which have helped administrative efficiency, compliance, and transparency. And I do want to highlight two recent events. I think the scrapping of the retrospective tax amendment and the privatization of Air India very clearly indicate the resolve that the government has of moving through some of these hard and tough decisions. And being involved in Air India directly, I could see the role that the government was playing there. So we have not only some big bang reforms, but there are small number, a lot of small reforms that are happening, which don't take the attention of, don't capture media attention, don't get highlighted, but they have a very significant impact on business and investments. So we look forward to the varied perspectives and insights from our panelists today, many of whom are very engaged on this subject. So let me start by requesting and inviting Mr. Amitabh Khan, who has a very rich perspective on India's reform journey and how it's enabling investments. Mr. Kant, I know, has to leave early. So if any of our panelists have any questions for him, I have a few. After he has given his address, we will probably, if he has the time, we'll probably request him some Q&A. So I'll hand it over to you, Mr. Kant.
Thank you, Mr. Memani. My illustrious colleague, Sumita Davra, my very distinguished friends, Mr. Richard Hild and Mr. Richard Rosso, Mr. Goldie Hyder, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I thank CII for inviting me to address this session on tackling India's reform journey, the investment trajectory. My belief is that it is only through increasing investments in the economy can India travel on a high growth path in the coming years. In the years following the global financial crisis, investment stagnated in India, particularly private investment. Reforms were necessary to boost India as an investment destination, raising our productivity and economic growth prospects. Reforms can take many forms. They can be economic reforms where policy action pivots towards facilitation of wealth creation. They can also be governance reforms where the benefits of government programs reach their intended beneficiaries. The past few years have seen India reform agenda gather an unprecedented pace. Over the past few years, India has seen both economic and governance reform. However, this improvement in government process has not just been left to improving the business environment. There has been also a profound transformation in the delivery of government schemes and benefits. This has ushered in an era of transparency and accuracy through a concerted effort towards digitization, ending years of leakages. India has adopted a multi-pronged approach that created an enabling environment for private investments and entrepreneurship to thrive. We saw India's biggest taxation reform since independence with the introduction of the Goods and Services Tax in 2017, subsuming 17 taxes and cesses, creating a true national market. The increased revenue flow from GST in the last couple of months show that Goods and Services Tax has stabilized and will continue to grow. Corporate taxes were made globally competitive, and direct tax compliance has continuously been made easier both for individual and corporates. Faceless assessment and appeals, the taxpayers' charter, a dispute resolution mechanism under the Direct Tax Vivad Se Vishwas Act, all have been a reality in the past few years. Retrospective taxation has been eliminated recently. India finally had a modern bankruptcy law with the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. Another sector where modern regulation was required was the real estate sector. With the passage of the Real Estate Regulatory Act, RERA, consumer rights have been protected. The foreign direct investment regime was also overhauled with the abolition of the Foreign Investment Promotion Board and a continuing opening up of sectors to FDI. We have long known that the transformation of East and Southeast Asian economies were built on the back of a robust manufacturing sector, driving export-led growth. Yet, India was unable to fully integrate itself in global value chains. Our share of manufacturing in GDP has remained constant since the early 90s. Exports have grown substantially since then, but remain concentrated in the service sector or in capital intensive manufacturing. Labor intensive manufacturing, be it electronics manufacturing or garments, saw a declining share in global markets owing to lack of competitiveness. To address some of these limitations, the government has launched several production-linked incentive schemes in key sectors such as mobile manufacturing, white goods, textile products, network products, solar PV modules, amongst others. These schemes have been extremely well received by the industry and will play a large part in developing India's manufacturing capabilities and enhancing India's size and scale of manufacturing. In 2020, a year where the full brunt of lockdowns were felt in the economy, the government unveiled an ambitious reform agenda. 29 central labor laws were rationalized into 4 codes. The definition of MSMEs was raised upward, which will allow companies to expand operation and investment while still retaining the status of MSME and a host of government benefits that come along with it. After nearly 50 years, the coal mining was demonopolized and thrown open to competition from the private sector. A new tariff policy was also announced in the power sector. Sectors such as insurance and defense were opened up to foreign direct investment. If India's investment climate were to improve, reforms were necessary but not sufficient. We needed reforms in governance. Government processes needed to become leaner and more efficient. The government's role had evolved to that of a facilitator of private sector-led wealth creation. An overarching focus on improving the ease of doing business in India has paid dividends. We have seen our ease of doing business ranking improve substantially by 79th position in a span of 4 years. Apart from improving processes at the central government, we also started ranking states on their performance, leading to improved processes across the nation. Over 1,400 antiquated laws were eliminated. The improvement in government processes was not just limited to business. There was a concerted effort to ensure that the benefits of government programs reach their intended beneficiaries. Mission Karma Yogi has been launched to provide a new national architecture for civil service capacity, ensuring that the civil service is ready for the future. Disinvestment and privatization are being pursued to improve the productivity and efficiency of public sector enterprises, unlocking their economic potential. Air India has been privatized and the asset monetization pipeline will push for better operation and maintenance efficiency from the private sector. Accompanying these on economic and governance reforms, there has been a huge focus on innovation and entrepreneurship. The Prime Minister drove the Startup India movement in 2016. We had then not anticipated that there'll be such a dynamic startup ecosystem built in India. We have over 50,000 startups that have come up within the past few years. During the COVID period of 2021, 10 months, we have seen over 42 new unicorns in India, many of them getting financed through IPOs in India itself. At the same time, the intellectual property rights regime has seen an overhaul. The time required for patent examination is reduced from 6 years to a mere 12 months. The period of examination in new trademarks has reduced from 13 months to less than 30 days. The impact is there for all to see. From a rank of 81, India has improved radically on the Global Innovation Index to 46, and we intend getting into the top 25 within the next 2 years. The steps taken over the past few years are promoting the increased formalization of the Indian economy. Aiding this process has been the increased digitization across the sectors. Digital payments have been promoted in a big way. The unified payment interface is set to become one of the largest payment systems in the world. Through the Digital India Mission, a multitude of government services are now available to citizens online, including the government e-marketplace. All procurements of government are being done digitally in a transparent manner. GEM has transformed the legacy procurement system through digitization and a disruptive marketplace model. BharatNet is connecting villages to high-speed broadband, and PM Wani is creating Wi-Fi hotspots in public spaces throughout the country. The result of these efforts is that India has one of the most robust digital ecosystem, and we are known world over for our digital inclusion model. We have 1 billion plus biometrics in the form of Aadhaar cards, 1 billion plus bank accounts, and 1 billion plus mobiles. This is the all-powerful JAM Trinity. Bringing down the cost of logistics is another crucial enabler of India's participation in global value chains. The huge government push towards infrastructure creation is also having positive multiplier effect on the economy. The Gati Shakti program marks a paradigm shift in decision making to break the silos of departmentalism. Gati Shakti will bring in synergy to create a world-class seamless multimodal transport network in India. In a revenue-constrained environment, sustaining public investment in infrastructure requires unlocking financing through innovative models, and the National Asset Pipeline and the National Monetization Pipeline are in efforts towards this. Public investment in infrastructure take on even a more critical role in the times of an economic slowdown owing to the multiplier effect. The National Monetization Pipeline serves two critical objectives. Firstly, it unlocks value from public investment in infrastructure, and secondly, it taps private sector efficiencies in operation and management of infrastructure. NMP is targeted at de-risked brownfield assets with a stable revenue generation profile. At the same time, we've been able to build a very mature ecosystem in the renewable energy sector, boding well for our collective future. We believe that the future will be digital and the future will be green, and therefore companies which are going green are enhancing their values and are attracting capital. Access to credit also remains a crucial enabler of the economic growth, as efficient financial intermediation direct funds to the most productive sectors of the economy. The Mudra scheme was launched to boost credit to micro entrepreneurs. Access to formal credit to MSME was expanded. The National Bank for Financing Infrastructure Development, MBFID, has been established as the principal development financial institution for infrastructure financing, including the development of bond and derivative markets. The National Asset Reconstruction Company will aggregate NPAs and bank balance sheets and manage to dispose them professionally. This step will incentivize quicker action on resolving stressed assets, thereby helping in better value realization. The move will strengthen banks' balance sheets, enabling them to expand lending, thereby boosting the economy. Ladies and gentlemen, the economic and social development go hand in hand, as we have seen in the development experience of East Asia. Ayushman Bharat is providing health insurance to over 500 million families, and this is one of the largest programs in the world where health insurance is fully digitized. We have introduced a new education policy after a gap of nearly 3 decades. A new skill development mission has been launched and apprenticeship have been expanded. New social security schemes providing pensions to farmers, traders, and informal workers have also been launched in the last few years. As I said, going digital and green are likely to be the key catalysts of competitiveness in the post-COVID era, and the next generation technologies such as AI, ML, the blockchain, amongst others, are all based on a digital backbone. India is generating vast amounts of data that can be leveraged, and India is moving from being just a data-rich country to being one of which is extremely data intelligent. Climate change is one of the reality for which we are developing adaptation and mitigation strategies for. To fulfill our vision of making Indian products globally competitive, this is the time for us to establish a new identity of quality and reliability, and therefore we are pushing for greener industries. Ladies and gentlemen, reforms cannot be seen in a piecemeal fashion. There must be pieces in the puzzle that form part of the big picture. Economic reforms create the potential for wealth generation. Governance reforms ensure that the opportunities for wealth creation are seized upon by businesses and individuals. All of these reforms and initiatives will have the effect of boosting India's investment prospects, raising our productivity, and ensuring our growth is sustainable, inclusive, green, and resilient. The economic and governance reforms undertaken in India in the last few years address critical bottlenecks that have helped India's growth story, and I'm sure will usher in a new era of growth and prosperity. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Sukant. I think this was very comprehensive coverage of what has happened over the span of last 7 to 8 years, starting from GST to the insolvency law, to the administrative reforms, to the national monetization policy, disinvestments, social reforms, climate change, data, and everything else. So thank you for a very, very comprehensive view of what's happened in the reform, in the entire reform space in India. If anyone who would like to raise any questions, Mr. Kant, I do hope we have some time with you.
Yeah, I'm there with you.
Okay, great. Any questions that anyone has, any of the panelists or any of the others? I have a few questions I would love to ask him, but if anyone wants to go at it. Yes,
Rajiv, I have one I could bring up to Mr. Kant. I think both Niti Aayog and DPIIT have done a good job too on providing draft and model regulations for states to consider. I wonder if there's any other areas in terms of incentivizing states to kind of improve their own business remarks that Niti Aayog is looking at right now, because there's been such great work in that space in times past. Thank you.
So, Richard, that's a very, very important question, because in a federal polity, in a country as vast as India, which is bigger than 24 countries of Europe, you have to push for change through the states. And therefore, one of the key things that we've done across the board is to start ranking states in areas like education, in health. We've just done this on sustainable development goals and on multi-poverty index. And one of the things we started doing is that on central sector schemes, a certain allocation should be kept apart for good performance. We should try and ensure that over a period of time, increased funding should flow to those states which are delivering on some of these reforms which will push the agenda of growth in due course. But more than that, I think what we and DPIIT do together is to handhold the states and push them to bring in a greater level of ease of doing business, do away with procedures, do away with regulations. The first year we did ease of doing business ranking of states, Gujarat came #1. The next year, Andhra beat Gujarat. The third year, Telangana beat Gujarat and Andhra. But the good thing was that the eastern part of India, Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand, which had positions of 25th and 26th, they carried so many reforms that they came 4th and 5th. So this is one way of pushing for reforms, by naming and shaming, by putting competition in front of the public, so that the public in a democracy asks for change.
Yes, Gopi, please. Thank you.
First of all, Amitabh, it's great to see you again, my friend. It's been about 6 years or so since we met in Toronto with our friend Prem Watson. You haven't changed whatsoever in terms of your drive and determination and resilience. So congratulations on all the progress that you've made. It's tangible and measurable. You did mention the challenge of being in a federation. Of course, Canada's one also. But I'm wondering whether you've also tried to dissect the sector by sector approach, so that when businesses look inside India and see some cases protectionism in some markets, but opportunities in others, would you consider taking a more sector by sector review as opposed to relying on the state competition that you just described?
So that's a very critical comment. And when we came out with the production linked incentive scheme, we'd done a very, very detailed analysis of how to make India a very integral part of the global supply chain. We are great believers in the fact that we are in a world of comparative advantages, And there are certain items which we need to import to make them. There is a certain import intensity to exports as well, and there is no way India can grow for long periods of time without exports being a very major driver of growth. And therefore, if you look at the economic growth history of India, India has grown in those periods when exports have grown substantially for longer periods of time. And that shows that India must become extremely competitive. One of the key challenges for India was that it lacked the size and scale of manufacturing. We had too many medium, too many small, and too many micro enterprises. And we needed the backward forward integration of the MSMEs with the larger companies. And therefore, what we've tried to do with the production linked incentive scheme is to push for size and scale, particularly in the sunrise areas of growth. So if you look at the PLI scheme, we focused on areas like advanced chemistry cell battery manufacturing, electric vehicles, battery storage, a whole range of electronic goods and network items in the 5G areas, etc. And therefore, our belief is that the production linked incentive scheme, which is for a limited period of 5 years, it is only to build size and scale. And if you do not achieve the targets that you have fixed for yourself in terms of increased growth, you will miss out on the incentive. So the focus is really to make India competitive through ease of doing business, scrapping antiquated laws, making things simpler and easier, and bring in the size and scale so that India can become a highly efficient exporting nation to the world.
Mr. Kant, I had a couple of questions. There have been a slew of reforms that have happened, and there are a lot of, I would like to add, there are lots of small ones which don't capture the headlines, but they have a very, very significant impact in the way projects will get executed in India. One of the things that a lot of companies are now asking, and especially if you look at after India's commitment in COP26, that cannot be done alone by private sector. And whilst India has given the date of 2070 for net zero, but I think there are some very significant milestones that are there for 2030, and for that a lot of changes have to happen. So from your standpoint, from Niti's standpoint, are you looking at seeing how government and private sector participate, and how do you provide policy support, procurement support, technology transfers to ensure that India achieves the goals that it has set out for COP26?
Yeah. Again, a very, very important question, and a very, very, very critical comments you made, Rajiv, because you see, India has occupied just 1.7% of the carbon space in the world. Many countries have actually, most of the advanced world has taken away all the carbon space. But irrespective of that, between peaking year and net zero, America took 71 years, Europe has taken over 40 years. But irrespective of that, India's strategy is that we should aggressively pursue a decarbonization strategy, and we should be the first country in the world to industrialize without carbonizing. And therefore, our belief is that if you look at the two key statements made by the Prime Minister, he set long-term goal, but more important than that, he set short-term goals for the country. That is many things to be achieved by 2030. But if you go back and look at his Independence Day address, he focused on two things. One is a green hydrogen strategy, because India today imports fossil fuel worth about 160 billion, which in the next 10 years will be about a 320 billion worth of fossil fuel imports. India has demonstrated to the world that it is one of the cheapest producers of renewable power. It has done over 150 gigawatt of renewable power, including wind and hydro. And therefore, it's producing solar energy at 2.7 cents per kilowatt hour. and it is possible for it to use renewable energy to crack water and produce green hydrogen. And India's ambition is that by the time it becomes 100 years, in 2047, it should be the world's largest producer of green hydrogen. It should be the largest producer of electrolyzer. It should be the largest producer of renewable energy, and it should be the largest exporter of clean energy to the world by exporting green hydrogen and green ammonia to the world. Now, this is being pushed through the green hydrogen mission, and we will ensure that we work in partnership with the private sector. All that has been achieved in India in the renewable energy sector has been done in partnership with the private sector. You have very dynamic companies. The policy changes have led to India achieving success in this. We are pushing for battery storage. We are pushing for advanced chemistry cell batteries. We are pushing for clean mobility. We are pushing for a shared, connected, and a zero emission world. And we are pushing for green hydrogen for India to become a global champion. And therefore, we will work in very close partnership with the private sector in all these areas, and we'll create the green champions of tomorrow, because there is no future for fossil fuel based products.
Thank you very much. The other question I had was that, I know that you've been very involved in the national monetization pipeline, and we are estimating almost $60 billion of revenue coming through over the next few years. Are you seeing enough interest from overseas investors? Is there a way where they can give their feedback on that? That's a question I keep on getting from a lot of them.
So we keep interacting with all the major investors. We keep meeting, we keep interacting with all the players of InvITs and REITs, etc. There is no shortage of resources, let me assure you. We need to put out projects. We are pushing the individual ministries. While we are coordinating that work, asset monetization is being done across sectors. So you had a power grid asset monetization through InvITs. You have a number of road projects which are going through TOT and through REITs. You have many projects which will be coming. We are just requesting the central ministries to accelerate the process through a lot of warehouses, pushing the railways through trains and stations, pushing the power to put out gas pipelines. All these are areas of growth for the future, and all of them must be structured in their own innovative manner. So our job is really to push the individual ministries into doing more and more of asset monetization so that there is greater productivity and efficiency in the country.
Right. Excellent. The one question which is slightly which I'm getting from some investors and some analysts. I have a clear view on that, but I think it'll be good to get your perspective also, and I think to share it with the wider audience. The farm laws came, for the right democratic reasons. I think they had to be repealed. People do ask the question: does it change the appetite of government to do further reforms, significant reforms as they go by? So it'll be good to get your perspective on that.
India is determined to carry out reforms. We need not lesser reforms, but we need more and more of reforms. And the government will push for greater levels of reforms across sector, make things easy, make things simple. The basic philosophy of this government is that wealth is created by the private sector. We have to make things easy for them, and the government must act as facilitators and as catalysts, and we'll continue to push all reforms in that direction.
No, thank you. Exactly. I think that's exactly what we are seeing on the ground play out. So thank you very much. Any further questions for Mr. Khan?
I thought you have grilled me enough, Mr. Memon.
No, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you so much for giving us your precious time and very, very insightful address. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I'll now request Mr. Richard Held. He's the Group Chair, UK India Business Council. It'll be great to have your comments and initial remarks.
Thank you very much. And also thank you to my fellow panelists. I have to say, having sat through Mr. Amitabh Khan's speech just now, I have to say it really is quite remarkable. It's a tour de force of what the situation is in this present moment in time. So many congratulations. I am going to address certain key elements that Mr. Kant has raised, but within the context of events that are, if you like, very particular to the UK and India. Obviously, earlier this year, my Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Prime Minister Modi announced high-profile commitments in terms of a comprehensive strategic partnership in order to double the amount of trade that is and investment that is currently being transacted between India and the UK by the year 2030. This is driven fundamentally by the fact that India is reforming itself and making itself into an environment where it is operationally an extremely attractive place to develop. The key thing that the free trade agreement, which is one of the key elements of this comprehensive strategic partnership, which hopefully will be announced and launched, the process will be launched in the coming weeks, it will enable a greater partnership in working together in terms of enabling both parties to reform in ways that will catalyze economic growth and sustainable development, both in the UK and in India. Clearly, free trade agreements focus to a certain extent on reducing tariffs to underpin growth, technology transfer and employment. But there are also areas, as Mr. Kant has said, reducing non-tariff barriers to goods, such as aligning standards and simplifying procedures and process. But underneath all of this has to be a recognition that IP has to be protected and that there is an alignment of data protection rules to drive growth in innovative, tech-rich and digitally driven technologies and industries. This is what we are really looking forward to in the free trade agreement to drive the reform agenda of India. But at the same time, again, what Mr. Kant has said is that there is a fundamental necessity to continue focusing on improving the ease of doing business. And we at the UK IBC are about to launch our 7th annual Doing Business in India survey, where we survey UK businesses operating in India. And we continue to see year on year an improvement in the operating environment. Telecommunication facilities, availability of skilled labor, the supply chain, support and service providers are all elements that have substantially improved the business environment for UK companies and indeed for Indian companies elsewhere. UK businesses also remain absolutely overwhelmingly of the belief that the self-reliant India mission is an opportunity to do more business with India and not less. I have spent the last 3.5 weeks in India. I returned from India on the 3rd of December. I found it an extremely enlightening and exciting visit. Not only did I sit down and talk with the Chief Economic Advisor to the Ministry of Finance, to Mr. Kant himself, to the Industry Minister of Maharashtra, but also with Indian companies, large and small, as well as UK companies operating in here. And I can actually endorse what you, Rajiv, just said earlier in terms of the economic positivity that is currently in India at this present moment in time. And Mr. Kant has signaled the, if you like, the staggering number of unicorns that have appeared on the Bombay Stock Exchange in this year. That underscores the opportunity and indeed the liberalization that is occurring in India. Areas that came out and struck me in my travels around was the collaboration that have occurred in the healthcare and in the vaccines area. Obviously, AstraZeneca and the Serum Institute is a case study, but there are other areas, including medical devices and medicines, where there's also significant opportunities due to the reforms. Defense and security in Indo-Pacific and defense itself is an extremely important area in which we need to work together on. And we have seen we've seen reforms in this area. I visited the opening of the Advanced Manufacturing Technology Center in Lucknow, which is specializing in 3D printing technology in relation to defense. That is a collaboration between the University of Nottingham in the UK and with PTC in Lucknow. This is just one area. Insurance, financial services, logistics, education are all areas where digital creativity and digital advancement can throw up opportunities. Mr. Kant has also talked about battery technology. My visits took us to the factory that is being built by Ola in relation to its ambitions in the electronic vehicle two-wheeler market. 2 million square feet of factory space, production of 10 million units a year, 15% of the entire global market is going to be produced out of the factory located in Tamil Nadu. Hydrogen technology is another area that Mr. Kant has mentioned. Grey, green, blue hydrogen is already being used in machineries, and there is already an active supply chain that is being built out in India, as well as extensive usage is being developed. These are areas that throw up significant opportunities. So the overall picture that I have gained in my 3.5 weeks is that there is significant leverage in terms of opportunities based off the reforms that have been introduced in India. This is not to say that there can't be continual improvement and further reforms. Clearly, the data protection bill, which it will be introduced, or hopefully will be introduced in the winter session, throws up certain concerns as far as the international community is concerned. And obviously, as the bill moves through the houses, then we will get further clarity as to what the intentions and definitions are around that. But data remains absolutely fundamental to our businesses going forward and the success of our businesses going forward. We've heard from Mr. Kant that India's future is going to be built on data, and therefore this legislation is going to be critically important. We've heard of what the positive impact of momentum has been in terms of the changes in retrospective taxation and the privatization of Air India. I'd also like to, if I may, Rajiv, just include another example, which is, I think, if you like, the statements that have been made in relation to the telecoms industry in India. I think that has also given international investors comfort that there is going to be a vibrant and sustainable future going forward in that sector. So overall, I see that India is in a very, very good place in terms of leveraging off its reforms, and we look forward to working with India in going forward in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Herald. I think I didn't realize the level of the amount of time that you have spent and the level of detail and visiting the center in Lucknow and visiting the Ola factory. So I think that gives you a real sense of what's happening in the ground. So thank you very much for your your insightful comments. I will now request Mr. Richard Rosso, who is the Senior Advisor and Wadhwani Chair in US-India Policy Studies. So Rick, over to you for your comments, remarks.
Thank you. Thank you. Such a pleasure to be with you and of course to be here with my friends at CII that have been such leaders on really pushing for reforms that'll help unlock business opportunities and commercial opportunities in India. I'm going to talk a bit about how we kind of look at the reform process in India. Looking back 7.5 years ago, when the Modi government first came to office, there was a lot of debate and deliberation about what a state leader that was known as being very business friendly would do with the tools that he would take on from being in Delhi with the central government in terms of reforms. Would he, change things on trade? Would he look for individual sectors? What kind of things would be on the agenda? And we actually found a bit of frustration that it was kind of hard to imagine what reforms would be on the table because there was no framework to judge it by. And without a framework, beauty is a bit in the eye of the beholder. Some people felt that unless GST and bankruptcy moved, then the government hadn't reformed. But if you're an oil and gas company and you see the new hydrocarbon exploration licensing policy get released, well, that to you is the biggest reform that can happen. So what we did 7.5 years ago was to create a framework, and we borrowed heavily from the great work that CII and a lot of economists around the world had done. And we pulled together a list of 30 significant reforms that the Indian government could consider. Not ones that they said they wanted to do, but ones that the global community and particularly business leaders had thought would have the biggest impact in growing the economy and creating jobs. And over the course of 5 years, we tracked every single month. So this wasn't simply a static wish list that was issued when the government came out, but instead every single month we track the progress on these reforms. And that allows us to do a few things. We can keep a running total to look at how many reforms have taken place. You can look at the pace of reforms as well. So did the government reform quickly or slowly? 30, some think it's too many, some think it's too few. And I think the fact that we have arguments on both sides probably means that it's a pretty good number to keep an eye on. So let's talk. We just crossed the halfway mark of the Modi government's second term, and we can talk, using this framework that we developed on how the government's doing. I think a lot of the individual reforms that we count have already been listed off by the prior speakers, and they are extremely significant. But again, we can talk a bit about pace as well. So of the 30 reforms that we've been tracking since the Modi government's re-election 2.5 years ago, the government has managed to finalize and complete 5 of those reforms. An additional 4 of them have been partially done. And then there's some others that are pending right now, like for instance, the privatization of Air India, which is very close to getting across the finish line. The first year actually saw a relatively quiet period of reforms. Most of the 5 reforms that have taken place have all been in the last 1 year. You saw a bit of an economic slowdown that was accentuated because of some of the additional slowdown triggered by COVID. And that seemed to be a bit of a trigger point when the government has really started to use, both in parliament as well as through administrative reforms, a lot of its energy on stoking the economy. And I would say overall, it's been fairly significant when you look at the impact. In the face of COVID, in the face of slowdowns and things like that, you actually see India pulling in greater levels of foreign direct investment than at any time in India's history. Over a 12-month period is ranging in recent months between 60 and 70 billion dollars over a 12-month period, and that's only fresh equity. That's not counting reinvested earnings and things like that. So, so in the face of COVID and a slowing economy, the fact that foreign companies are deciding that India is the destination of choice to park their capital is a pretty telling statement. So, so the pace of reforms is a bit slower than it was during the first term. At this point, during its first term, the government had completed 6 of the 30 reforms that we're tracking, versus 5 in the second term. But I think that the opportunity to try to exceed what they did in the first term is pretty self-obvious, because at the second half of the first term, the Modi government had really slowed on reforms as they were trying to, complete some significant reforms they'd done on goods and services tax and bankruptcy. So the pace is really starting to pick up over the last year, which speaks well to India's ability to attract that capital that'll help create jobs and improve development indicators across the country. Our program, I'll just wrap up by saying, and I know we're going to have hopefully some time for questions, but our program also looks very closely at what's happening with state level reforms. And the question came up about, the attempt on farm reforms. There's been previous reforms on things like land and labor. And sometimes those issues end up becoming so politically sensitive, they can be difficult to move in Delhi. But you do see state governments actually plowing new ground in a lot of these, critical reform areas. A few states, have actually taken the lead on moving on land acquisition policies. Tamil Nadu, for instance, has a mandatory 3-day period for issuance of an encumbered certificate, which is critical for getting the ability to start developing land. Haryana is also looking at simplifying industrial land acquisition. On labor issues, you see relaxations across the board, new industrial policies in states like Jharkhand and Telangana, Jammu and Kashmir, and then electric vehicle policies, as Mr. Khan was talking about, the opportunity to take advantage of global drive towards decarbonization to trigger new industries in India. And electric vehicle policies and renewable energy, a couple of areas we see state governments moving very fast on. So from Delhi, I think a bit of a slow period just after the re-election, but COVID and economic slowdown appears to have triggered a new wave of reforms from Delhi, and states have continued more or less unimpeded. So good news, I think, in terms of what a number of leading states have been doing. I know time is a bit short, Rajiv, so I'll hand back the rest of my time and hopefully save a bit of time for questions. Oh, you're on mute, I think.
Thank you. No, thank you. That was very insightful, and I have a few questions. Hopefully, we get time towards the end, and we'd love to ask you some of that. So, Goldie, over to you. You're president and of the and CEO of Business Council of Canada, and we've seen a lot of investments coming from Canada. So it'll be good to get your perspectives.
Thank you very much, Rajiv, and to all of you joining. I'm joining you from the Hotel Oberoi in Dubai, as a matter of fact, where the sun has just set. So I'm hoping the lighting isn't too bad at the other end. But I want to thank Chandra, and I want to thank the esteemed panelists that I'm on with. It's a real privilege to be here with you. The Business Council of Canada is an organization comprised of 170 CEOs of the largest companies in the country, employing 2 million Canadians directly, half the Toronto Stock Exchange, and probably another 6 to 8 million Canadians in the supply chain. So a significant indication of how Canada sees things, and particularly as global companies. And if there's one thing that I would say the sun cannot set on, it is multilateralism, it is globalization, it is trade. So despite the fact that we are in the backdrop of a US-China so-called devolution and really a battle for supremacy, we other countries, particularly middle powers, cannot get caught in that battle. We need to be thinking strategically and how it is that we are going to help our own economies grow. And it is with that lens that I'm so delighted to be here, not just as a Canadian, but as an Indo-Canadian, having been born and raised in Hyderabad, to celebrate really the journey that India and Canada have been on over the last number of years, where we have been able to see some of the momentum that Amitabh spoke about so eloquently. One thing about India, it's never short of ambition. The question now is, can we execute and match that ambition? And that's where I think there remains some work to do. And what we're looking at in Canada is trying to diversify our economy. We are seeing protectionism alive and well, not just across the ocean, but really just south of us on an ongoing basis. And it doesn't seem to matter whether the administration is of red or blue. Protectionism is alive and well in America, and protectionism includes outright violations of trade agreements where the ink hasn't even dried on agreements like the USMCA that was just signed. So we're certainly cognizant of the fact that what was isn't anymore. And that means really looking outward, particularly to the favorite term these days of the Indo-Pacific, and really starting to think about how to diversify. We in Canada are a hockey nation, and we have this famous saying about don't be where the puck is, but go to where the puck is going to be. And it's quite clear that the puck is not only going to be, but already has started to move towards the Indo-Pacific. And so diversification is really on the minds of Canadian business leaders. We have been, in different parts of the world. Some of our businesses have been in China since before even Canada was formed. And so when we look out in the world, we see a chessboard or a game board that's getting ever complicated to navigate. And it requires a shrewdness, it requires a strategic approach, and it requires an eyes wide open approach to both foreign policy and trade. And so as we try and navigate this quagmire, India comes across as obviously a market, not just one that can't be ignored, but that represents tremendous upside in terms of the population, 50% below the age of 25. If you put India and China together, you'll have 1 billion people in the middle class in that part of the world. So we look at that as a very attractive place to do business. But you know what business loves the most, and it seems to be in high demand these days, is predictability, stability, confidence that the regulatory regimes, the political infrastructure and beyond, and frankly, the social cohesion of nations can offer a platform where businesses can take not the short view, but the long view. The idea that we can be there for not years, but decades, if not longer. And Canadian businesses have done a really good job of seizing the potential in India, despite the lack of trade infrastructure. And I'll come to that in my close. Our businesses continue to invest simply in business to business. Our companies in financial services, in infrastructure, and commercial real estate, and so forth. Our pension funds in particular have played the long game in India. And as someone who contributes to our pension plan, I'm grateful that they did many decades ago, because the growth has been astronomical compared to what's available in other. Sorry, you're seeing a lamp squeeze through my hotel room here. We are definitely seeing India as really just the beginning of opportunity for what the potential is. I would say, though, with the greatest of respect to our guests from India, that it has a brand image problem to some extent about still remaining a protectionist market. I asked Amitabh particularly about sector by sector, because all sectors are not created equal. Some sectors where there's an attractive opportunity to invest in continue to come across as being protective, and I totally acknowledge that that is not unique to India. Frankly, my own country is guilty in some instances, as are others. But business leaders want to see those trade barriers come down. They want to see more predictability, and they want to see access to markets, as open as can be. So I would simply say that India has a potential to be even more of a magnet for capital. There's an old saying in business that money follows message. The message is certainly there. There's indeed momentum, the amount of investment that's happening and the amount of partnerships that are taking place with Canadian businesses. I believe there's over 1,000 Canadian companies in India, and I think that over time you'll see them grow. Last point I was just going to say is that what business also likes is trade infrastructure. And we have been to the altar many, many times, Canada, India, and to be candid, the groom hasn't shown up. And that's been a bit of a problem. We need to do something about that. I'm here in the UAE, where I just heard your previous guest, the Minister of State for Trade and the Economy of the UAE, talk about how rapidly an agreement is being formed between India and the UAE. We need to act with the same level of urgency with Canada and India to at least get to an early harvest type agreement, where business can use trade infrastructure as a confidence building measure to enter a market that is frankly, where the potential is limitless. And so let me just say with that, I remain an eternal optimist that we can get both a trade agreement in place and that India can work towards bringing down some of the protectionist measures in a sector by sector basis. So whether it's trade, whether it's financial services or legal issues, there's work to be done. But as I said, India has the capacity to do it. And certainly the government is moving fast by Indian standards to doing a lot of things quickly, which is something that is duly being noted around the world. And so I thank you for that. And again, thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Goldie. Thank you for your, again, very insightful remarks, very thoughtful remarks. Really appreciate it. I would now request Ms. Sumita Ravra, Additional Secretary at DPIIT. Thank you very much, ma'am, patiently for listening through this entire session. And we look forward to your remarks.
Greetings to all the esteemed participants. I come at the end, and it's been a pleasure to hear everyone and to take on board all the views. The summit promised some vibrant dialogue and debate and deliberation and engagement with the best of minds, and it's truly been a pleasure to be listening to the panelists today. The summit is jointly organized by the CII and the DPIIT, the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. I'm confident that the present summit, which is joined by close to 200 speakers from over 40 countries, including overseas ministers, our own Indian ministers, the global CEOs, heads of institutions, leaders, experts from across the world, will facilitate the overall objective, which is to hear from all of you on how to further improve the investment climate in India. Already there quite a few points have come in and I have been noting them, and CII will be helping us put all these thoughts together. As we are aware, the country is currently celebrating 75 years of independence, Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, and the Ministry of Commerce and Industry is striving hard to achieve the vision of the Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi of building a new Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is on the 5 pillars of intent, inclusion, innovation, infrastructure, and investment. This flagship program is taking us ahead to become a part of the resilient supply chain in line with the global requirements and the opportunities which have been coming up. We are striving hard to improve the quality of manufacturing besides the scale of manufacturing, as Mr. Kant has already explained through the PLI scheme. The objective is to bolster the domestic manufacturing and integrating more efficiently with the global supply chains, and also to boost trade in sectors such as technology, gems and jewelry, engineering, capital goods, to name a few. There have been steps to empower businesses and citizens and to encourage them towards contributing to New India. And I will be listing out a few of these measures from the DPIIT side in a few moments. And the reform measures have focused, as has already been mentioned in this session, on technology, infrastructure, liberalization of the guidelines, regulations, reduction of compliance burden, amendments of laws, and so on. There is a focus on process re-engineering and bringing various ministries and departments of the state, of the center and state together. And the approach being followed is of breaking the silos and working together, working in networks to achieve our common objective. The efforts of the central and state governments have been playing a key role in creating a more friendly investment ecosystem from the aspects of legislation, administration, infrastructural reforms, systemic reforms, and so on. And a lot of credit must also be given to the state governments who have been working tirelessly in a spirit of competitive federalism and learning from each other. The facilitation being done by DPIIT as one of the departments, many departments in Government of India, which are facilitating these efforts of learning from each other, the best practices which are being followed in creating a more friendly investment ecosystem. I'll very quickly mention a few of the recent initiatives. The first is the National Single Window System. The National Single Window System has been soft launched in the month of September this year, and it is a portal which integrates approvals and clearances from all the departments and ministries of Government of India. At the moment, 19 central departments are already onboarded on the National Single Window System. And at the same time, the state single windows are also being integrated progressively on the National Single Window System. As of now, we have 11 states in place. Another 3 states will be joining the National Single Window by the end of this month. And by the end of this year, that is end of December, we will have 32 Government of India departments, ministries with all their clearances, and 14 states with all their clearances on the state single window system as part of this one integrated national single window system. We have mapped 2,500 approvals which any investor would need. An investor sitting anywhere in the world can go to the portal, enter the sector of his or her choice of investment, and look at the various approvals which would be required, and then straight away start applying for those approvals on the national single window. And the 19 departments of Government of India and the 11 plus another 3 states soon to be there will be able to give all their approvals, clearances online, and the investor can track the clearances. This is seen as a big historic reform towards creating a more investor-friendly ecosystem. The National India Industrial Land Bank has also been integrated with the National Single Window System, and an investor sitting anywhere in the world can today go to the portal of the either the Single Window System or the India Industrial Land Bank and select an industrial plot of his or her choice. The Industrial Land Bank, it is a one-stop repository of all the industrial infrastructure related information, the land which is available for industrial activity currently in India across 4,500 plus industrial parks in the country. And it maps, my figure at the moment is in 1 lakh hectares. That's something we use in India. About 5 lakh plus hectares of land are mapped. GIS mapping has been done. There is a portal, there is a mobile app as well. I would encourage you to kindly use it, visit it, use it, and also help us to propagate it. Someone mentioned about India brand. We would like to take your help to improve the information awareness on all these tools we have put in place for potential investors. The production linked incentive scheme is something you're all familiar with, and it has already been introduced in 14 sectors, with drones and drone components being the latest. There has been tremendous progress during a short period of 1 year when we were all impacted by the disruption of COVID. But in the PLI schemes, there's been tremendous progress, and all the 14 sectors, they have taken approval from the cabinet. They have drafted their guidelines, except for 2, drone being the recent most. So their guidelines are under finalization, and we also have the guidelines of one more sector, textiles, which is under finalization. Rest out of 14, all the 12 sectors have finalized their guidelines. The application windows have been opened, and out of a total of 14 sectors, 8 sectors have already approved the applications, and the process has begun. The investments have begun at a great speed, and that is where we feel that the PLI scheme we've been able to showcase the efficiency of the government in how fast we've been able to give approvals for the PLI schemes, various PLI schemes. It was also mentioned that a lot of work is being done on minimizing the regulatory burden, the regulatory compliance burden, and there has been a huge exercise which has resulted in 25,000 plus compliances being reduced, which were found to be unnecessary or which could be digitized. And there is a first of its kind central online repository on a portal of all the central and state level compliances. A lot of work has been done by the states and by the Government of India ministries to remove burdensome compliances, decriminalize laws, repeal redundant acts. And this is there all on the portal for you all to see. At the same time, there were also voices from the industry that there is a need to fast track investments. So there are potential investors, they have expressed their interest, but they would like the investment to be fast tracked because of perhaps some cross-cutting interministerial issues or some clarifications they require, and so on. In this context, an institutionalized mechanism has been put in place again during the COVID, during the pandemic time. In June last year, 2020, an empowered group of secretaries, which is headed by the cabinet secretary, the highest civil servant in the country, has been put in place. And today we had yet another meeting of the empowered group, which looks very closely at the cross-cutting issues, policy issues, the other obstacles in the way which investors frequently face in the policy arena, and quick decisions are taken to fast-track investments. The empowered group is supported by the project development cells, which are there in all the ministries today. This again is the work of the last 1.5 years. This institutionalized mechanism where each ministry has a nodal officer, a senior nodal officer, to handhold the investors and to identify the cross-cutting policy issues which they are facing and take it to the empowered group. The DPIT is the secretariat for this process. We have been talking about the national infrastructure pipeline. which envisages a total investment of 2.1 trillion USD over the next 5 years, covering 9,000 identified projects. We've been talking about the national monetization pipeline, where again there is a huge monetization potential of 6 million rupees. This time my figure is in rupees, I'm sorry. I have not been able to convert it over a 4-year period. What I would like to say is that the national monetization pipeline, co-terminus with the national infrastructure pipeline, identifies monetization ready assets and describes the potential value that can be unlocked. And I heard Mr. Goldie Haider say India as state that India is the beginning of opportunity. These are huge opportunities for investors, and they are all there with due diligence and put up in a very transparent manner. We have taken many historic decisions in the recent past, cutting the corporate tax rates, making us one of the most competitive tax regimes for investors anywhere in the world. There are schemes such as bonded warehouses, advanced authorization schemes, the export promotion capital goods schemes, which have been introduced to promote manufacturing, get India into the global value chain. Plug and play facilities have been created by states all over the country. The Prime Minister's Gati Shakti National Master Plan is again another huge opportunity for investments and also for improving the ease of living, the ease of doing business, minimizing disruptions, and also meeting the oft flagged concern of investors on logistics, connectivity issues. It will connect the industrial clusters with the highways, with the airports, with the railways, and a lot of that has already been achieved, and you can see that on our India Industrial Land Bank, about which I spoke earlier. Measures such as this has resulted in India attracting historic levels of foreign direct investments, and our foreign direct investments have been the highest ever during the period of pandemic last year at 81.97 billion USD in the financial year 2021. This is an endorsement of India's status as a preferred investment destination. And actually in the last 7 years, 2014 to 2021, India has received a foreign direct investment inflows worth $440+ billion, which is nearly 58% of the FDI, total FDI, which has been reported in the last 21 years. Going forward, we are all committed, the government is committed to continue to work on improving the business climate in the country, which is why this summit. Our focus is to make the procedures further seamless, bring all the government agencies onto a common online platform, such as the National Single Window, reduce the compliance costs, improve e-governance, to mention a few, and the session proceedings shall provide an opportune platform to capture these ideas and perspectives, consolidate partnerships for a globally competitive India. A dual strategy of facilitative reforms for ease of doing business and effective monitoring mechanisms are important. And I'm sure all of us working together will help to attract more overseas investments and make India the manufacturing factory of the world. Thank you very much for your patience and this opportunity to interact with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Davra. I think that again you summarized the a lot of the nitty-gritties, and also especially the single window, which I think is if once it gets going, I think it will be of tremendous usage to all the people who are looking at investing in India. I also do want to thank you for, I know you've been the nodal officer from DPIIT who has been coordinating the partnership summit. So on behalf of CII and on behalf of all its members, thank you very much for taking your time out and helping the partnership to be a success. So I think I would have loved to ask questions, but we've run out of time. I think it's very clear, as you heard from every speaker, clearly there is a massive reform agenda that India has gone through. It's still, there are some outstanding ones, as Rick mentioned, he still feels that there are another 15, 20 to go for, and I'm sure there will be many more reforms that are happening. But I think a lot of reforms are actually happening not necessarily on a policy level, but actually making business more easier to function, more transparent, more technology-led, and happening with much greater speed. So with that, I will just on that positive note, optimistic note, and hopefully the reform journey in India will move forward, will move faster, and help in bringing in more investments so that it can unleash the true potential of the country. So with that, I would like to thank all my fellow panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and insights. Thank you.